Basically, I teach in that law that one person cannot achieve greatness by themselves. These people principles will do two things for you. Now, there's a lot of people think attitude is everything, and it's not. Today, I would like to talk to you on the subject, winning with people. This is a book that I've written that basically this series of teaching lectures is off of. And I wrote the book to help you to be more successful in your relationships with other people. So I would like for you to look in your notes because we're going to move very quickly. There's a lot of things to say. I've got a lot of things to teach. And I'm so glad to do this project with my friends, the Goats. When I look over here to my right and I see these four people, these people are family to me. Their commitment is my commitment. You know what? Your values are my values. You love people. I never met anybody that was more passionate about what they did than you, and I've never met anybody that wanted to add value to others more than you. And because of your heart and my heart, we do these projects together because we do believe that the tools and resources we place in the hands of others truly do make a difference. So you have your notes before you. Are you ready to roll? Look at the thesis of the book. People can usually trace their successes and failures to relationships in their lives. That's so true. Let me explain that. Let's first of all talk about how we can trace our successes to relationships in our lives. In my book, The 17 Laws of Teamwork, one of the laws is the law of significance that says one is too small a number to achieve greatness. Basically, I teach in that law that one person cannot achieve greatness by themselves. I was in Joburg, South Africa, doing a teamwork seminar, and I can remember well, I challenged 10,000 corporate people in that setting. I said, I would like for you to name one person who by himself or by herself, without the help of anyone else, has ever done anything significant for society. And a guy up in the balcony, I'll never forget, it's like he was always waiting for somebody to ask that question. He yelled out, he said, Charles Lindbergh, he crossed the Atlantic by himself, solo in a plane. And I looked up and I said, you're right. And everybody clapped because 10,000 people thought that he had found somebody who had done something by himself without the help of anyone else. And then I said, but did you know, sir, that Ryan Aeronautical Engineering designed and built the plane? And did you know that 10 millionaires financed the trip? Hello. Any other suggestions? You see, one is too small of a number. It's too small of a number to achieve greatness. So when you look at your successes, can I tell you what you're going to find? You're going to find people in the picture. It's also true about your failures. When you look at your failures, you're sadly going to find people in the picture. In your notes, 7 out of 10 people lose their job because of personality conflicts. They don't lose their job because they lack skills. They lose their job because they can't get along with people. In fact, nearly 100% of all the counseling that's done is relationship-centered. That's why my friend Ken Hemphill really had it on the nose when he said, with all the emphasis on improved education in America, you might think knowledge is the greatest asset for vocational success. The Carnegie Foundation discovered relational skills are far more important if you hope to succeed at work. Their study found that only 15% of a person's success is determined by job knowledge and technical skills. 85% is determined by an individual's attitude and ability to relate to other people. Wow. Talk about being in the people business. 85% of your success, my success, the Goat's success, is our ability to relate and connect with other people. I knew that when I decided to write this book, Winning with People, I knew there was a market for it when I read out of Forbes magazine some of the true resumes of people who were trying to get a job. They were applying for a job. In fact, I put it in the book, and it's not in your notes, but I just want to read a few of these. You're not going to believe that people actually wrote these things when they were looking for a job. For example, one person, when they sent in their resume, said, "It's best for employers if I don't work with people." Now, there's somebody you want to hire. Oh, okay. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, we'd like to hire you. Oh, you don't work with people. Okay, that'll be great. Well, we'll isolate you in another room. Or here's another one. The last company made me a scapegoat, just like my previous employers. I love this one. Note, please don't misconstrue my 14 jobs as job hopping. I have never quit a job. Do you think they maybe could use my book, Winning with People? Huh? Or one more. There's just one more. References. None. I've left a path of destruction behind me. And in the book, Winning with People, back in your notes now, discover the people principles that work for you every time. Now, I didn't say discover the people principles that work every time. And I didn't say discover the people principles that work for others every time. I did say discover the people principles that work for you every time. You see, these people principles will do two things for you. Number one, they will help you better understand others, and they will, number two, help you better understand yourself. And the result of that, the daily practice of these people principles will improve your people skills with everyone. Now, note, I did not say everyone will like you. Hello? I didn't say that if you read this book that everybody will like you and all the people don't like you all of a sudden come to you one day and say, oh, you're my best friend. You must have read Winning with People. No, you see, we cannot always determine how others will respond to us, but we can always determine how we will respond to others. This book is all about making you a better people person. You see, when I respond correctly to others, I win. When others respond correctly to me, we win. In life, the skills you use and the people that you choose will make or break you. I've divided the people principles in this book according to 5 critical questions we must ask ourselves if we want to win with people. Number 1 is readiness. Are we prepared for relationships? Number 2, connection. Are we willing to focus on others? 3 is trust. Can we build mutual trust? 4 is investment. Are we willing to invest in others? And 5 is synergy. Can we create a win-win relationship? So let's dive in. Let's dive into the readiness section. Are we prepared for relationships? In the readiness section where we ask ourselves, are we prepared for relationships? I have 5 people principles that I want to talk about. Number 1, the lens, L-E-N-S, the lens principle. The lens principle says, who we are determines how we view others. This is huge. You see, as I start helping you develop your relationships with others, you're going to notice something. I don't have you look at others first. I have you look at yourself. Groucho Marx said it best. He said, I wouldn't want to belong to any club that would accept me as a member. And the question that I must ask myself is, what is my perception of others? You see, who you are determines the way you see everything. You cannot separate your identity from your perspective. All that you are and every experience that you've had color how you see things. It is your lens. Here's what I mean. Number 1, who we are determines what you see. I talk about a fellow from Colorado who moves to Texas. He built a house with a large picture window. And as he went from Colorado to Texas, as he looked out his picture window, he couldn't see any mountains. All he could see was just flat land. And he said, there's nothing to see. And then the guy from Texas moved to Colorado, built a big picture window, looked out, and he said, I can't see anything. The mountains are in my way. You see, it's all perception, who I am. Margaret and I, for example, will be at a party, and after the party, we'll be going home. She'll say, yeah, what was the guy in the blue sweater talking to you about tonight at the party? I'll say, Margaret, what blue sweater? She said, the guy that was right here, John, in front of you, with the blue sweater on, that talked to you for 15 minutes. He was 12 inches from you. The blue sweater guy, what was he talking about? I don't remember a guy in the blue sweater. Now, she can't conceive this. She says, how can you be looking at a guy right in front of you with a blue sweater and not see the blue sweater? And you know what? I tell her it's a spiritual gift. Now, see, when Margaret sees people, she sees what they wear. When I see people, I don't see that at all. I see their facial expressions. It's not right or wrong. It's just who you are determines what you see. Let me give you another example. Number 2, who you are determines how you see others. It's like 2 men who came in on separate occasions during the day to a hardware store. They were both moving to the same town. And the guy that owned the hardware store, the guy walked in and he said, look, I'm just moving to the town. I got a question to ask you. He said, how are the people in this town? Are they friendly? Are they warm? And the guy that owned the hardware store, very wise, said, well, let me ask you a question. How were the people in the town that you just left? He said, well, they weren't very friendly at all. In fact, we're so excited about moving because we're hoping that the people are friendlier here. And the guy in the hardware store said, I'm just sorry to say this because this is going to disappoint you. The people aren't real friendly here either. A couple hours later in the same hardware store, another guy came in and he said, we're just moving to the town. I've got a question to ask you. How are the people in this town? Well, the hardware store said, let me ask you a question. How were the people in the town that you just left? Oh, he said, we just hated to leave the town. We loved everybody. The people were so friendly. They were so cooperative. We had great neighbors. And the hardware owner, he smiled. He said, I've got great news for you. The people in this town are just the same way. You see, there are people that have destination disease. They just think if they can just move somewhere or meet someone or do this or go there, that all of a sudden their life will change. That's why I love the expression. I love this expression. No matter where you are, there you are. Look in your notes. The way people see others is a reflection of themselves. If I'm a trusting person, I will see others as trustworthy. If I'm a critical person, I will see others as critical. If I'm a caring person, I will see others as compassionate. Phil McGraw said, you teach people how to treat you. Statement number 3. Who you are determines how you view life. Who you are determines how you view life. I remember going to a St. Louis Rams football game. I sometimes speak for the team. And so during the game, after I spoke to the team, I sat with the coach's wife. And one of my friends on the St. Louis Rams team is John Maxwell, and his wife's name's Kim. And so I happened to be sitting with Kim and the coach's wives watching the game. And you know, Kim and her husband, being a coach, they've lived in probably 6 or 7 different states. I mean, because coaches move around a lot. So I looked at Kim and I said, now, Kim, let me ask you a question. I said, of all the places you've lived, where's your favorite place that you lived? And Kim just looked at me immediately, and she said, where I'm living right now is my favorite. And I said, oh, so in other words, you like St. Louis best? She said, no, I didn't say that. She said, I like the place where I'm currently living best because it's a choice. The lens principle. This is an amazing principle. Who you are determines how you view others. Now, number 4. Who you are determines what you do. Now, what determines who we are? I think there are several things that make us who we are, such as, number 1, genetics. We are a lot about what we have been born into, so there's a genetic deal that hardwires us. Number 2 is self-image, no question about that. T.S. Eliot said, half of the harm that is done in the world is due to people who want to feel important. They do not mean to do harm. They are absorbed in the endless struggle to think well of themselves. And then, who we are also is determined, number 3, by our experiences in life. The experiences that we've had, the experiences that we've encountered really form us. And number 4, who we are is determined by attitudes and choices about those experiences. That is so true. Attitude is so key. And what I have discovered, let me just stop here for a moment and talk to you. I don't want to take much time here in this teaching session. But what I have discovered about attitude is a lot of people think attitude is everything, and it's not. Attitude isn't everything, and let me explain why I know that. I know a lot of people that have a great attitude, but they're incompetent. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? The good news is they're happy. The bad news is they're going bankrupt. You know what I'm saying? Whee! Lost it all. Got fired from a job. Yay! You know. Attitude isn't everything. Attitude is the difference maker. All things being equal, attitude will make the difference. Always has been, always will be. So attitude and our choices, that helps make up who we are. And then number 5, our friends, the people that we associate with. They're going to do a lot to determine who we are. There's one little paragraph I'll read before we go to people principle number 2. The way you view others is determined by who you are. You cannot get away from that truth. If you don't like people, that really is a statement about you and the way you look at people. Who you are determines how you view others. Your viewpoint is the problem. If that's the case, don't try to change others. Don't even focus on others. Focus on yourself. If you change yourself and become the kind of person you desire to be, you will begin to view others in a whole new light. And that will change the way that you interact in all of your relationships. Okay? So the lens principle basically just says, very simple, before you look at others, begin to understand yourself first. Principle number 2. The mirror principle. The mirror principle says the first person we must examine is ourselves. I love this next quote. Coping with difficult people is always a problem, especially if the difficult person happens to be you. And the question that I must ask myself, have I examined myself and taken responsibility for who I am? People unaware of who they are and what they do often damage relationships with others. The way to change that is to look in the mirror. It's something all of us must do. It's what I call taking the mirror test. Consider these truths that we must learn about ourselves. Number 1, the first person I must know is myself. That speaks of self-awareness. Human nature seems to endow people with the ability to size up everybody in the world but themselves. Isn't that true? Margaret and I have been married now for 35 years, and we've just made this commitment to each other, and we've done this for so many years. We know each other's strengths, and we know each other's weaknesses. And we have determined to help each other in our weak areas, not to hurt each other in weak areas. You see, when you have a spouse or you have a friend and they have weak areas, by the way, we all do. Is that not true? We all have areas where we're not strong in. See, relationships either build or begin to disintegrate based upon those weaknesses, not the strengths. Watch what I'm saying. If Margaret knows, and she does, she knows all of my weak areas. She knows the areas that I'm not strong in. She knows the areas that I have issues that I need to fix in my life. She either can know that and make me cognizant of it and help me with them, or she can hurt me with them. See, it's what we do with the other person's weak areas that determines the relationship, whether I'm helping them or whether I'm hurting them. And one of the most important things that we can do is to begin to know ourselves. And what I have discovered is it's impossible for us to know ourselves unless we have some good friends who love us unconditionally, but will be honest with us. Number 2, the first person I must get along with is myself. That deals with your self-image. Author Sidney Harris observed, if you're not comfortable with yourself, you can't be comfortable with others. I would take that one step farther. If you do not believe in yourself, you will sabotage relationships. In the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, you remember I talk about the law of the lid, which basically says my leadership abilities and skills will be the lid upon my success in life, and that you can't rise any higher than your leadership lid. I think it's also true in the area of self-image. I think the lid on relationships is a person's self-image. And if that self-image is not very good, relationships will never be able to be developed or never begin to rise because of a poor self-image. Number 3, the first person to cause me problems is myself. So that calls for self-honesty. Comedian Jack Parr quipped, "Looking back, my life seems to like one big obstacle race with me being the chief obstacle." Okay? Number 4, the first person I must change is myself. That calls for self-improvement. In the crypts of Westminster Abbey, the following words were written on the tomb of an Anglican bishop who lived in the 11th century. "When I was young and free, my imagination had no limits. I dreamed of changing the world, and as I grew older and wiser, I discovered the world would not change. So I shortened my sights somewhat and decided to change only my country. But it too seemed immovable. As I grew in my twilight years, in one last desperate attempt, I settled for changing only my family, those closest to me. But alas, they would have none of it. And now as I lie on my deathbed, I suddenly realized if I had only changed myself first, then by example I would have changed my family, and from that inspiration and encouragement, I would have been able to do better for my country, and who knows, I may have even changed my world." Statement number 5. The first person that can make a difference is myself. That calls for self-responsibility. In the 17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork, I wrote about the law of significance. One is too small of a number to achieve greatness. I truly believe that no significant accomplishment can be achieved by the individual effort. However, I also believe that every significant accomplishment begins with the vision of one individual. That person not only possesses the vision, but also takes responsibility for carrying it to others. If you want to make a difference in this world, you must take responsibility for yourself. It reminds me of the time Margaret and I were in Christchurch, New Zealand, got up in the morning. We both liked to drink Diet Cokes. There were no Diet Cokes in the area, and so I said, "Margaret, let me go see if I can go find some." Went down the hallway, didn't find a soda machine. I was coming back to our room. I looked at a door that said staff only. I said, "I'll bet it's in there." I raised my right hand, made myself a staff member, walked right on into the room. There was no soda machine. So I'm starting to walk out of the door I just came in that said staff only, and as I start to walk out, there's a full-length mirror on that door with the words, "Take a good look at yourself. What you see is what the people are about to see." I thought, how true this is. The mirror test. Before we look at others, look at ourselves. And don't be like the guy who had health problems. And the doc says, "You've got some major health problems." And he said, "Doc, could you just touch up the x-rays?" People principle number 3. People principle number 3 is the pain principle. The pain principle says, hurting people hurt people and are easily hurt by them. Isn't that true? I love this quote. "Be yourself" is about the worst advice you can give some people. The question I must ask myself is, do I hurt people, or am I too easily hurt by them? To really understand the pain principle and have it help you in dealing with others, you need to keep in mind these 4 truths. Number 1, there are many hurting people. In fact, Ann Landers, I remember reading, she said that 1 out of 4 people is dysfunctional and imbalanced. Now, when she said that 1 out of 4 people is dysfunctional and imbalanced, I thought that's 25% of the population. So let me just take a moment. We're here in the studio, and I'm doing this teaching lesson on relationships, winning with people. So just think about it for a moment. You're sitting here in a crowded studio, and there's a couple hundred people here. And you've been talking to maybe 3 or 4 people around you. Now, if they seem okay, come on, huh? It could be you. Well, you know what? We're laughing at that because can I tell you something? We all, to a certain extent, are dysfunctional. We've all got issues in our life, and then this pain principle that hurt people, aren't easily hurt by people is just true about a lot of people in life. Let's go on. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer compared the human race to porcupines huddled together on a bitter cold winter night. The colder it gets outside, the more we huddle together for warmth. But the closer we get to one another, the more we hurt one another with our sharp quills. And in a lonely night of Earth's winter, eventually we begin to drift apart and wander out of our own and freeze to death in our loneliness. Tremendous insight. Number 2, those hurting people often hurt people. Herman Hesse wrote, "If you hate a person, you hate something in him that is part of yourself. What isn't part of ourselves doesn't disturb us." Number 3, those hurting people are often hurt by people. My friend Kevin Myers probably illustrated that to me one day better than anything else. He said, "John, it's like having a splinter in your hand." He said, if you've got a splinter in your hand and somebody comes up and shakes hand with you, and of course, if it's infected and it's kind of hurting, as soon as they shake that hand, you pull your hand back and you kind of overreact. And the person that just shook their hand, they're saying, oh, did I squeeze too hard? What did I do? Well, they didn't do anything. The reason you overreacted wasn't because of them. It was because you had a splinter in your hand. And in other words, you were infected, and that infection caused you to be touchy, to overreact. And what I've discovered in this pain principle is that there are a lot of hurting people. And to be honest with you, a lot of people have what I call a splinter in their soul. And they just overreact. And you look at them and say, why did this happen? I can't imagine this. Well, it's because of that whole process of hurting people are often hurt by people. It's the splinter within them that causes the overreaction. And then number 4. Those hurting people often hurt themselves. This is so true. They often hurt themselves. They're like the old comedy routine many years ago, Amos and Andy, where Andy was always smacking Amos on the chest, and Amos got tired of getting smacked on the chest, so he went to his buddy one day, and he had a coat like mine. He opened it up, and he had 6 sticks of dynamite. And he says, you know how I hate him just smacking me on the chest? He said, I'm going to fix him. He closed his jacket. He said, the next time he smacks me on the chest, he's going to blow his hand off. What happens when we try to hurt others? We often hurt ourselves. Dealing with hurting people, Glenn Clark advises, if you wish to travel far and fast, travel light. Take off all of your envies, jealousies, unforgiveness, selfishness, and tears. People who have not gotten past their hurt have a hard time doing that. And as a result, they act and react differently from healthy people. Let me compare. Healthy people are more willing to change, where hurting people are less willing to change. Healthy people are more willing to admit failure. Hurting people are less willing. Healthy people are more willing to learn from others, and hurting people are less willing to learn from others. And healthy people are more willing to do something, and less healthy people are less willing to do something about the problems that they have in their life. Healthy people are able to travel light, and hurting people are carrying a lot of baggage. If you find yourself dealing with a hurting person, which we all must do from time to time, then I advise that you do the following. Number one, don't take it personally. Just quit taking their comments in a personal way. Number two, look beyond the person for the problem. In other words, when they're saying things that are hurting, ask yourself, I wonder what they're going through. Number three, look beyond the situation. The situation may be something that's gotten overblown, but just look beyond it. Number four, do not add to their hurt. There's a tendency when people escalate and overreact for us to escalate and overreact. Don't do that. And number five, help them find help. And I close with this very important note that I could literally talk for a half hour on, but I do not have the time. But it's a very true statement. I've studied this statement probably for 12 or 15 years, but it's true. The weaker person controls the relationship. When you've got a couple, you got a married couple, you've got two or three people in some kind of a working relationship, remember this, the weaker person always controls the relationship. The stronger person controls the response. Wow. People principle number 4. Before I give that one to you, let me ask you a question. Are you learning something? Yes. Huh? You look at your neighbor and tell him, I'm learning something. Go ahead and tell him. Okay? And look at your neighbor and say, I do hope you are taking good notes on this. Already forgot about the lens test and the mirror principle, haven't we, huh? Always throwing that out the window. This is for Joe. Or I know this isn't for you, but don't you know some people in your organization who could really use this book? Okay. People principle number 4, the hammer principle. The hammer principle says, never use a hammer to swat a fly off someone's head. Oh, you got a fly. Boom. Ooh, help him there. Alexander McLaren said, if you would win the world, melt it. Do not hammer it. The question I'm asked to ask myself is, would others say I overreact to small things in a relationship? Let me just stop here for a second to say to you, this was an area I really had to work on when I first married Margaret. Because as typical married couples trying to adjust to each other and understanding that there's some major adjustments to go through, I've always been a great debater. I've always been a great arguer. And so in our first couple years of marriage, I won every argument. I mean, I'd sit down with Margaret, we'd get through this, and I'd press my case and do the whole deal, bring in the evidence, the whole deal, you know what I'm saying? Bring in the props, the whole thing. And I'd walk out of the room and I'd say, touchdown, whoa, I won another argument. This is amazing. I'm 12 for 12, you know what I'm saying? What I didn't realize was that I was winning the arguments, but I was losing her. What I didn't understand was that my hammer approach to every issue wasn't doing so well. Now, that was something that I had to really adjust to and really work on. And I had to, I was kind of like Calvin and Hobbes. I love this one where he's sitting there at the stand and says, a swift kick in the butt for $1. He says, how's business? Well, it's terrible. That's hard to believe. I can't understand it. Everybody I know needs what I'm selling. Well, isn't that true? How many of you know somebody needs a swift kick in the butt, huh? I mean, think about it. It was just like, oh, yeah, good night. Come over here. Come over here. Let me do this for you. You know what I'm saying? The hammer principle just is a great principle that says just don't do overkill on little issues. Okay, now, when tempted to use overkill, I try to temper my behavior using the following 4 T's. You may want to embrace them when you find yourself in a similar situation. The first T is total picture. In other words, get the total picture. It's like a middle-aged guy who went in the cocktail lounge, and he went right up to the bar and he says, do you have anything that will cure the hiccups? And without a word, the bartender reached down under the bar and picked up a real wet bar rag and just smacked the guy across the face. The guy was astounded, and he looked at him and He says, do you have hiccups now? And he says, well, no. But he said, I never had. He said, my wife's in the car. She's the one who got hiccups. Yeah. In your notes. Do you come to conclusions long before the problem has been laid out before you? That is a common occurrence for most of us who have strong personalities. That's why I have trained myself to follow a process to keep me from hammering people with answers before they finished asking the question. When someone is sharing his point of view with me, I try to listen, ask questions, listen again, ask more questions, listen some more, and then respond. Wow. I've had to really work on that because it's a weakness in my life. The second T, one is total picture. Number two is timing. Lady Dorothy Novell observed the real art of conversation is not only to say the right thing in the right place, but to leave unsaid the wrong thing at the tempting moment. It seems to me that the most common cause of bad timing in relationships is selfish motives. If you have small children, think about their timing. It's often poor, but that's because they usually think only of themselves. For that reason, when little things bother us, our number one objective must be putting our personal agenda aside and building the relationship. If you have examined your motives and you can be certain that they're good, then you need to ask yourself two timing questions. First, am I ready to confront? That's a pretty easy question to answer because that's really a matter of whether you've done your homework. The second is harder. Is the other person ready to hear? If you've laid a relational foundation and the two of you are not in the heat of the battle, then the answer may be yes. Wow, that second question, is the other person ready to hear? You may be ready to unload, but are they ready to hear? The third T is tone. Just tone. People often respond to our attitudes and actions more than to our words. Many petty conflicts occur because people use the wrong tone of voice. The writer of the Proverbs stated, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And the fourth T is temperature. As tempers flare, people are prone to dropping bombs when a slingshot will do. And that can cause a lot of trouble because the size of a problem often changes based on how it is handled. In general, if the reaction is worse than the action, the problem usually increases. If the reaction is less than the action, the problem usually decreases. That's why I try to follow a self-imposed guideline that I call the reprimand rule. Take 30 seconds to share your feelings, and then it's over. Never let the situation mean more than the relationship. Margaret and I have a way of doing that. You know, most of you in this room would have children. Some of you have small children. Some of you have grown children. Let me tell you something about parenting. It never ends. I used to be naive. I used to think, there's a time when my kids will go to college, they'll get married, and I'm done parenting. It doesn't end. No matter how old they are, as long as they're your children, parenting continues. The only problem is that when they're little, when they make a mistake, it's very minor. As they grow older, when they make mistakes, it can be very major. And so there are times when Margaret and I, through the years, have had to talk with our kids about different issues, and we've done something that's helped us for years that our children don't know about until I wrote this book. When we have to confront them about a situation, we sit on the couch together and we hold hands. Now, they think that's a very romantic thing to do. We're sitting on the couch together and we're holding hands. But we're not holding hands because we're romantic at that point. We're holding hands to help each other. So if the argument gets heated, or if the voices begin to rise, I begin to get a little bit too involved in the process, Margaret just holds my hand and squeezes it. And when she squeezes it, she's saying, "Down, boy." Take a pill. Take a pill. Or if she seems to get a little bit too heavy in the involvement in the conversation, a little bit too intense, I just squeeze her hand. All we're doing is helping each other because we understand the hammer principle. The reaction, many times, causes a greater problem than what the issue really was. Don't use a hammer to swat a fly off of somebody's forehead. People principle number 5. The elevator principle. The elevator principle says we can lift people up or take people down in our relationships. Isn't that true? People can be either the wind beneath our wings or the anchor on our boat. And the question I must ask myself, would others say that I lift them up or take them down? There's an incredible poem by Ella Mae Wilcox called "What Kind of a Person Are You?" And or the poem's called "Which Are You?" But it's a great poem that I've mostly memorized because it's just incredible. Here's what it says. There are 2 kinds of people on earth today, just 2 kinds of people, no more I say. Not the sinner and the saint, for it's well understood that the good are half bad and the bad are half good. Not the rich and the poor, for to rate a man's wealth, you must first know the state of his conscience and health. Not the humble and proud, for in life's little span, who puts on vain airs is not counted a man. Not the happy and sad, for the swift flying years bring each man his laughter and each man his tears. No, the 2 kinds of people on earth I mean are the people who lift and the people who lean. Wherever you go, you will find the earth's masses are always divided in just these 2 classes. And oddly enough, you will find 2, I ween. There's only 1 lifter to 20 who lean. In which class are you? Are you easing the load of overtaxed lifters who toil down the road? Or are you a leaner who lets others share your portion of labor and worry and care? Now, there are 2 types of lifters. Number 1, some people add something to life. We enjoy them. They're what I call my easy friends. Does that make sense? They just add to our life. I mean, they don't burden us down. They don't drag us down. They just when they're around, it's just sweet. And they'll do little things that just kind of lift us up. They're just adders. They're our easy friends. Number 2, there are some people who multiply something in life. We value them. Now, let me read this one. Anyone who wants to can become an adder. It takes only a desire to lift people up and then intentionally to follow through. But to go to another level in relationships, to become a multiplier, one must be intentional, strategic, and skilled. The greater the talent and resources a person possesses, the greater his potential to become a multiplier. Now, I'm going to just stop for a moment because I'm going to get on leaners for a moment, but let's just talk about lifters for a second. How many of you know somebody that just lifts you up? I mean, you understand? Don't you just love to be around them? Don't you just love when they come to you, they just give you energy, don't they, huh? One of the things that I've always looked at the goats is the goat family, they're lifters. I mean, think about it. I mean, they encourage you. They pick you up. They lift you up. They say words of affirmation. Remember the old song, "Oh, Give Me a Home Where the Buffalo Roam"? Remember? "Where there never is heard a discouraging word." I think the goats came from there. I think the goats were raised up on that. Where there never is heard a discouraging word. Where they just lift you up and encourage. And we love the lifters in our lives, huh? Now, there are 2 types of leaners. The 2 types of leaners are, number 1, some people subtract something from life. We tolerate them. In Julius Caesar, playwright William Shakespeare's Cassius asserts, "A friend should bear his friend's infirmities, but Brutus makes mine greater than they are." That's what subtractors do. They do not bear our burdens, and they make heavier the ones that we already have. The sad thing, this is an important statement, the sad thing about subtractors is that what they do is usually unintentional. If you don't know how to add to others, then you probably subtract by default. The second type of a leaner is number 2. Some people divide something in life. We avoid them. Dividers are so damaging because, unlike subtractors, their negative actions are usually intentional. They are hurtful people who make themselves look or feel better by taking or by trying to make someone else do worse than they do. As a result, they damage relationships and they create havoc in people's lives. Now, this is the elevator principle. Elevator principle is very simple. You get on the elevator with some people, you're always going to go up. Isn't that true? You get on the elevator with others, there's only one button. Basement. No matter where you are, they will take you lower. One more thought about that. Isn't this true? The people that are the leaners, you know what I'm talking about, okay? You all know somebody like that, huh? Takes energy from you. What I've discovered about these leaners is their timing is impeccable. They know when you're low. It's at that moment. Huh? Maybe you've spent a little time with them and you're now going to your car and you're just about to get into the sanctuary of your car where you can shut the doors and lock it and keep out all leaners. And your hand is about on the handle and behind you, you hear this voice. And you know, it's a leaner. You just surrender. You just lean up against the car. And as they approach you, they just suck life right out of your body. There's 2 kinds of people on earth today. Just 2 kinds of people. No more, I say. Well, let's review the readiness principles. The lens principle, who we are, determines how we see others. The mirror principle, the first person we must examine is ourselves. The pain principle, hurting people hurt people and are easily hurt by them. The hammer principle, never use a hammer to swat a fly off someone's head. And the elevator principle, we can lift people up or we can take people down in our relationships. Are we learning something? Yes. Let's go to the next level. Connection. Are we willing to focus on others? 6 people principles here. Principle number 6. The big picture principle. Big picture principle says the entire population of the world, with one minor exception, is composed of others. Don't you love it? Albert Einstein said, a person starts to live when he can live outside himself. The question I must ask myself, do I have a hard time putting others first? When it comes to winning with people, everything begins with the ability to think about people other than ourselves. That is the most basic principle in building relationships. I know that may sound like common sense, yet not everyone gets the big picture or practices unselfishness. Instead, too many people act more like toddlers do, whose perspective is something like this. If I like it, it's mine. If I can take it away from you, it's mine. If I had it a while ago, it's mine. If I say it is mine, it's mine. If it looks like mine, it's mine. If I saw it first, it's mine. If you're having fun with it, it's definitely mine. If you lay it down, it's mine. If it's broken, it's yours. Seeing the big picture, requires the following. Number 1, perspective. People who lack perspective are like Lucy in the Peanuts comic strip by Charles Schulz. In one strip, while Lucy swings on the playground, Charlie Brown reads to her. It says here that the world revolves around the sun once a year. Lucy stops abruptly and responds, "The world revolves around the sun? Are you sure? I thought it revolved around me." Don't we know people just like that? You know, as I think of this big picture principle, and are we into self or are we into others? I can tell you that this was an area that I had to work on. As I began in my early ministry career, when I would go to a congregation, I can tell you honestly, the first thoughts that I had early in my career was, how can these people help me? I would look at their gifts, I would look at their talents, and I would say, okay, I wonder how they can help me here. I wonder how they can help me here. And I probably for 8 or 10 years, in leading people, always asked the question, how can they help me? And it took me a while before I realized that the question is not how can they help me? The question is, how can I help them? Can you imagine what turned around in my life when I began to focus on others and how I could add value to them without asking how they would add value to me? This is a huge statement. I've been living with it for the last 3 weeks because I read a lot and I take the good quotes, the good thoughts, and I let them settle in my soul. This one I've been letting settle in my soul for about 3 weeks, and I pass it on to you. I judge the success of a day based on the seeds I sow, not the harvest I reap. That says it all about the big picture. I judge the success of a day based on the seeds I sow, not the harvest I reap. I believe that with all of my heart. I believe that if you and I have the big picture, we'll understand that if we just keep adding value to people, if we keep helping people, if we keep sowing seeds. Can I tell you something, what I know about the law of sowing and reaping? If you sow the seeds, the harvest will be reaped. But you've never reaped a harvest in a field of seeds that you didn't sow. So our concentration in the big picture should be focusing on others and just sowing those seeds. So perspective is just amazing. That's why William Gibbons said, I love this, whenever you are too selfishly looking out for your own interest, you have only one person working for you, yourself. But when you help a dozen other people with their problems, you have a dozen people working with you. Perspective, that helps you see the big picture. Number 2, maturity. Maturity. Sometimes it just takes some maturity for us to see the big picture. It reminds me of, Margaret and I have 4 grandchildren, and little Maddie is now 4 years old, and Hannah will be 4 very soon. Okay. So they're cousins, Hannah and Maddie, about 4. They spent a week with us a few weeks ago, and we just had the best time. And Hannah and Maddie both think that Papa, that's me, they think Papa's main job is to be their personal servant. They think God put me on earth to do whatever they want me to do. And so in the morning, they'll get up and they have their whole agenda. I mean, they got their day lined up for me. They'll say, Papa, let's get in a golf cart. So we'll go out in a golf cart. Well, let's go to the lake and see the ducks. So we go to the lake and see the ducks. Well, let's get out. Let's chase the ducks. So we chase the ducks. So, well, let's go to the playground. So we go to the playground. And then, usually every afternoon about 2:30, Papa, let's go to the snack hut. And we sneak off to the snack hut without letting the parents know this because they love hot dogs. I get them hot dogs and Diet Cokes. You train your children and grandchildren very early in life. And they love we just have the best time. We just talk and laugh and have our hot dogs and Diet Cokes. And then at 5:30, when everybody wants to eat, they're not hungry. and I'm so proud of both my little granddaughters because neither one of them have ever told on Papa. Parents don't know. It's just wonderful. It's just our secret. It's just our secret. Now, every day, Hannah and Maddie get up. And they say, Papa, do this, Papa, do this. Not one time has Hannah and Maddie come up to me and said, Papa, we've been thinking. You have done so much for us. What could we do for you? You know what? That never enters a 4-year-old mind. And that's okay because they're 4 years old. What's sad is when you're 40 and you still haven't figured it out. That's why I love the diagram of the circle. Bob Buford did this in his book, Halftime. Most people are on the left. Their lives continually focus inward on themselves. You know that you have matured when you go from the left side the right side, where your whole life continually circles outward toward others. In fact, let me read what it says in that book, Halftime. While the first half self is small, the second half self is large. The first half self winds inward, wrapping tighter and tighter around itself. The second half winds outward, unraveling itself from the paralysis of a tightly wound spring. The small self contains only you. It is basically alienated, alone, and pathologically individualistic. The larger self is whole because it is bonded with something transcendent. Self-transcendence has legs. It goes the distance and completes the race. By the way, every once in a while somebody will say, well, just let them mature. They'll get older. As they get older, they'll get mature. Can I tell you something? I know people who've gotten older and they've not matured. Age doesn't always come with maturity. Sometimes age comes alone. Huh? Are you with me? Huh? Don't we all know people are getting older, but they're not getting better? Huh? Okay. Number 3, to see the big picture, responsibility. And I have in there, in your notes, a recipe for a miserable life. The emotional poverty of a self-centered life. Think about yourself, talk about yourself, use I as often as possible. Mirror yourself continually in the opinions of others. Listen greedily to what people say about you. Expect to be appreciated. Be suspicious. Be jealous and envious. Be sensitive to slights. Never forgive a criticism. Trust nobody but yourself. Insist on consideration and respect. Demand agreement with your own views on everything. Sulk if people are not grateful to you for favors shown them. Never forget a service you may have rendered. Be on the lookout for a good time for yourself. Shirk your duties if you can. Do as little as possible for others. Love yourself supremely. Be selfish. Recipe for a miserable, miserable life. People principle number 7. The exchange principle. The exchange principle says, instead of putting others in their place, we must put ourselves in their place. Sometimes when you give a person a piece of your mind, you lose your own peace of mind. And the question that I must ask myself, do I try to see things from others' point of view? Here's what I've discovered about the exchange principle. Number 1, we naturally do not see ourselves and others from the same perspective. Longfellow said, we judge others by what we feel capable of doing, while others judge us by what we have already done. I came across this piece called Whose Point of View that captures our nature and describes it well. When the other fellow takes a long time, he's slow. When I take a long time, I'm thorough. When the other fellow doesn't do it, he's lazy, but when I don't do it, I'm busy. When the other fellow does something without being told, he's overstepping his bounds, but when I do it, well, now that's initiative. When the other fellow overlooks a rule of etiquette, he's rude, but when I skip a few rules, I'm original. When the other fellow pleases the boss, he's an apple polisher, but when I please the boss, well, that's cooperation. When the other fellow gets ahead, he's getting the breaks, but when I manage to get ahead, that's just the reward for hard work. Whose point of view? Perspective. Number 2, when we fail to see things from the perspective of others, we fail in our relationships. One of my favorite stories in the book is the one I'm going to give you now. It's called The Hot Air Balloon. A man in a hot air balloon realized that he was lost, and he reduced altitude and spotted a woman below, and he descended a bit more and shouted, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend that I would meet him an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The woman below replied, "You're in a hot air balloon, hovering approximately 30 feet above the ground. You're between 40 and 41 degrees north altitude, and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude." "You must be an engineer," said the balloonist. "I am," replied the woman, "but how did you know?" "Well," answered the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of your information, and the fact is, I'm still lost. Frankly, you've not been much help at all. If anything, you've delayed my trip." The woman below responded, "You must be in management." "I am," replied the balloonist, "but how did you know?" "Well," said the woman, "you don't know where you are or where you're going. You've risen to where you are due to a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise which you have no idea how to keep, and you expect people beneath you to solve your problems. The fact is, you are in exactly the same position you were in before we met, but now somehow you've managed to make it my fault. Have we not been there, huh? I just love that. That's a great, you talk about people who need to get into the exchange principle. There were two of them. Okay. So how do we see things from another's perspective? Number one, leave your place and visit their place. When I see people who lack perspective of others, I just assume that they haven't traveled much or worked with people much. I remember, for example, much shame to me, I remember I used to think if you just work hard, you'll be successful. And then I started traveling to developing countries where people work from sun up to sundown. They work harder than me, and they're not successful at all. They're very poor. It just took me to go and see it from their perspective, to understand that working hard has nothing to do most of the time with being successful. My wife Margaret and I, we love to play Boggle. It's a word game. Basically, you're looking at the same letters, and you have a timer that basically gives you X amount of time to figure as many words out of that piece as you possibly can. And one of the things I discovered is if you look at Boggle on one side, she's on the other side, if about halfway through you just turn it around. Now, you've been seeing the same letters, but you see it from a different perspective. And all of a sudden, things began to open up to you again. Harry Truman said it well. He said, when we understand the other person's viewpoint, understand what he's trying to do, 9 out of 10 times, he is trying to do right. Number 2, acknowledge that the other person has a valid viewpoint. Number 3, check your attitude. That needs to be checked in almost all the people principles, by the way. And number 4, ask others what they would do in your situation. In an article in the Saturday Review, Ann Landers tells that she has learned about people, what she's learned about people through the letters she's received. Since I began writing this column, she writes, I've learned plenty, including most meaningfully what Leo Roston had in mind when he said, each of us is a little lonely deep inside and cries to be understood. I've learned how it is with the stumbling, tortured people in this world who have nobody to talk to. The fact that the column has been a success underscores, for me at least, the central tragedy of society, the disconnectedness, the insecurity, the fear that bedevils, cripples, and paralyzes so many of us. I have learned that financial success, academic achievement, and social or political status open no doors to peace of mind or inner security. We are all wanderers like sheep on this planet. Wow. It helps us again, once we understand this, to get the perspective and understand the exchange principle. Instead of putting others in their place, first put yourself in their place. Now, I just want to take a moment and say to you again, the lecture that we're giving is from my book, Winning with People. What really excites me is we have partnered with the Goads, and they have put together in this kit DVDs and CDs. You can view it, you can listen to it, an entire kit with the notes of this lecture that you're now viewing called Winning with People. It's so fun for me, again, to partner with them because here is the Goat's heart. They want to make a difference in your life. They want to help you with relationships. I wrote the book because here's what I know. Your success, 85% again, is going to be determined by your people knowledge, only 15% by your product knowledge. Thank you very much.